Okay, the previous session we have discussed about the Mule flows, right, and how many types of flows and what each of these flow and their usage, right. Today we will see in hands on that how these flows will looks and their behavior on variables, payload, and attributes across the flows. Okay, let's start with the simple flow. Okay, this is our flow, right? We create this. Now this listener already created. Now this is a parent flow, we call it as. Just name this as main flow. Okay, if you name this, then it will be easier for it to identify that if we have a number of flows in the application. Now set some payload. Okay. Parent payload. The same thing here, we set this. So parent payload. Okay. And now we create one more variable. Parent variable. Here we have to give name. This is just a display name. You could see this one. This is a display name. Okay. Here you have to specify the variable name of that, like Java and all, right. We have that name of the variable. Right? We have to see this parent var. Okay. Parent var and give this value a string, right. Parent variable. Now we are done with this. Now what we do at the end, we display this message at the end of this transform message. So what, according to the single flow, right, any payload variables attributes are there in flow can be accessible within the flow, right. So let's see here. Now you have payload and variable. How you can access this one, right? Two components are there. No matter how many components are there, you can just have this say parent parent variables and say you have to type that what's a vars, right? It is a variables, right? It will be hold in the wheres. You see, the moment you type that where, you see, it will become that all the variables that are stored in this wheres keyword. Say, and which variables you have created, say a dot, you could see parent variable. And then what is that? Payload, right? Now we have created one option called payload. So how, what is the syntax to get the payload? Just say payload, that's all. So it gives everything. Now you just run this program and see what you could see here. You could see what data I have set in the payload and what data I have set in the variable. So both come and display as a part of your output, which is application and JSON, right? Now let's say start the Postman tool to test it. సరే కూర్చోలేదు చెప్పుకుంటా కూర్చోమే సరిగ్గా కూర్చునైతే చేత కాదు వాయిస్. Let's see what is the HTTP listener parent flow. And double eight is the port. Okay. Sorry, this still not come up. Okay, still going on. Let's wait for a second. Okay, now it has deployed. Just send the request. So you could see parent variables, right, and payload. So this is a simple flow and a single flow. So that is the reason we can say that. So whatever you have the payload and variables in this flow, you can directly see that. Now let's create one subflow, right? Subflow, there is, you could say there is a component called subflow, right? Just drag this one. Okay, name it as simple subflow. Okay, now You could see when you drag this component, right? You don't see any exception handling thing here, and you don't see any source. See here, like you don't have a source in this subflow, which means subflow does not have a source and it does not have any its own exception handling. If anything goes wrong here, this will directly throw to this guy who is calling. Let's see how and we can call this subflow. Now let's have something here in the subflow, right? Logger, sorry, put the logger here. Okay, yeah, and you put some message, say subflow started. Okay, then now what we are trying to do, we are trying to see the behavior of payload and variables attributes of two different flows. Now in case of this subflow, let's see what happens. Now we use the same components, set payload and set variables. See, now this is the subflow payload. Right now we use the same variable here. What is used in the parent? Right? Subflow variable. Okay, and we shall call it as a cvar. Earlier we have named as pvar. We give the value as subflow variable. Now we are done this. But what is the syntax to call this subflow from this parent flow? Using flow reference. So using flow reference, you can call this, right? So when do you call the flow reference? You have to place, decide and place in the right place. You cannot just place somewhere on that. Say once you execute this subflow, after calling this subflow, it executes some logic and bring back, and then this transfer message you are expecting to display that message. You could see the error is displaying what, right? The moment you place this flow reference, right, it expects you to give the name of the flow which you are going to refer. You could see in this drop down all the flow names will be displayed irrespective of main flow, subflow, if I have n number of flows, but only particular to this application. It will not display other application flows. Okay, select the flow which you want to refer. Okay, just done now. Now you see this in this transform message, what we are trying to display the parent variables, right, and the payload. How many payloads are there here? Payload is two payloads are there, but both are related to one payload, right? You don't have a separate payload here, and the variables are two different variable names. One is parent variable, another is C variable, is the child variable. Now this time we can print child variables also. Try to say this vars dot what is this name? Okay, cvar. Okay, now let it complete billing. Now run this application. You could say this one. How many variables are there here for us? Two variables, right? cvar, pvar. So both are able to access. That is the reason you can see this. See, basically this child variable is in another subflow, right? But when you call here in the parent flow, where's dot means it is accessible, which means, right, it is like a tight couple, means it is completely accessible to the parent. All the variables and payloads in the parent flow can be easily accessible in the child flow. Again, any variables and payloads, or all variables and payloads in the child flow can be accessible to the parent flow, and the data which you have modified in the child flow will be reflected to the parent flow. In case of variables, right, it is a different variable name, right? You see here, but this variable is in the child flow, subflow, right, which is a child flow, then you still accessible here, right? This is the subflow behavior. Means simple generic thing, right? All the payloads and variables can be accessible in the parent and child. Anything you change in the subflow will be reflected back to the parent flow, which means here in our case we have changed, we have overridden the payload, right? Subflow payload, right? This is the payload. Initially it is holding parent payload. Now in the subflow, the child flow, I overridden this message with some other message. So as a part of output transform message, what you could see the message that is overridden, but here the variables, right, still holding the same values. Now let's see the application is started. Now give a request. You could see parent variables are accessible, subflow variables are accessible. You see the payload is overridden here, right? Because I have overridden the incoming payload is there here in the parent, right? I still have a reference, I still have access to override that one. I can override it here, right? Now coming to the exception part, right? As we discussed earlier about the different scopes of errors handling, error propagate, error continue, right? You can use anything here. Either you can handle exception at the flow level or processor level, right? Processor level means you can use try catch, and flow level you can use exception handling here, right? It is up to you which scope you have to, if which scope you want to use it here. But if something happened here in this subflow, this guy will revert back to the parent flow only. That we will see that exception handling mechanism in detail in the next section. Now let's stop this here and create a subflow. We are done with the subflow. Let's go with the flow, right? This is called a private flow. This we call it as a private flow. You could see the difference of this subflow and private flow. Subflow does not have any exception handling. It does not have any source also. Means it is totally different compared to the main flow. But if you look at the parent flow, private flow contains source and it have its own exception handling. Both, you can say both these component, why they are both are used for reusable purpose only. But if certain scenarios somewhere where you want to have your own exception handling in the private flows, means that you know, right, according to the real-time scenarios, what happens, right? Then sometimes if the private flow if the subflow executes, that means complete its process, then only I can proceed. Otherwise I don't want to continue my flow further. And certain scenarios, right, if the subflow still have exceptions, let ignore that exceptions and continue the rest of the flow and come back with the status, some come back with the result, so that the main flow can continue. In such scenarios they will go with the private flow. Let's see the difference. Then same payload, set payload, okay, and set variable. Okay, now here we over chain that. Just is something. Script language expression error. Okay. Now here we will change this private payload. Okay. Now here we will give this name as private. This sort of private, right? Just to give okay, private flow where PF where, and the value we give private flow variable. Okay, now we have to call this from the parent flow. How you do that? Using flow reference only. Right now this flow reference is calling subflow. You can just deassociate, means delink, just select the private flow. Simple. You no need to remove and reattach that. You just change the flow of the private flow, right? Right, you don't, so simple change, right? Some people just say remove this one and reattach. It doesn't make sense. So just go here and you could see the list of flows that we have created in our application, right? You just select that and save it there. This case, what happens? Let's see now, as we are trying to access the message from child flow, and in the previous message, now we have payload, same payload, but I have created a different variable called PF variable, means it's a private flow variable. Now try to access here. So this is not, now this will not be accessible right now at the moment, right? See, this PF where is there. Now you clearly see this one. The moment I type this one, right, PFR, the moment, right, just blindly you can also follow here. If say from this object, where's object, if you could see this one means, then you definitely, obviously, you will have access to those SubFLow variables payload access. If you don't see that one means you don't have access. But when this will not be accessed, in what type of flows, child flows, it will not access it, we will see in. So next after this, okay, let's see, the application is come up. Okay, it is deployed. Okay, you see, run this application and see what the output you can see. See, child flow parent variable. Okay, this is not yet restarted. I have changed. Where's that parent flow? Let me stop and restart. In between, we have restart, change this once the server is coming up. It is still holding whole session child variables, but we have changed private variables. Where's that PF? That is the reason it is. Okay. Now this case, what we could see, we still see mostly the same output in the sense, right? To which SubFLow, which child flow you are referring, that child flow variables will be accessed, and if anything you have overridden, that overridden values will be displayed as a part of output. But you say, one can ask that what is the difference? The difference is that there is no difference between these two SubFLows behavior compared when you go back to the parent, which means then after executing or accessing the variables, payloads in the child flows still accessible in the parent, and parent variables payloads will be accessible in the child. That behavior remains same. There is no difference with respect to the point one. Now if you see that point two, right, this SubFLow means if you create a flow using this SubFLow, it does not have its own exception handling. That is second thing. Third thing is it does not have a source, right? Here you have a source, listener. Here see like this, right? It does not have a source. If anything happens here, if any error happens here, it directly propagate, means throw the exception to the parent flow, means which whoever is calling this SubFLow. That is the difference. You come to private flow compared to the SubFLow, this behavior remains same as this guy also have access to all the parent variables, payloads, attributes, everything here. He can override the parent payloads, which again reflected back to the main flow, which is a parent flow. But the difference compared to this SubFLow is this SubFLow does not have any exception handling. See, you don't see any section here, but this guy have a exception handling, and this guy have a source. So that is how you can. So you can ask that you can put something here. Yes, you can put something. If someone wants, right? If someone wants to reuse this one, they can make a listener, put a listener or a scheduler. Anything they can go ahead with that. Means it have a source if someone want to reuse. But if someone want to connect this flow using some source, right? They cannot do this one. Okay, they should always use a parent flow reference to call this one, but this you can call from the using parent flow, and you can have any other listeners here like a scheduler or table draw, anything where what options are available for us to trigger a flow. You can go like that. See now parent variables, okay, private variables means private flow variable, everything is accessible. So this is how you can access the parent flow components in the child flow and child flow components in the parent. You could see right here I'm able to access this thing, means I can override these things. And how parent is accessing child means this child have a variable which is still accessible in the parent, because everything I'm displaying in the parent, that is called as accessing parent to child, child to parent, means both can be accessible. Now one more point here is that what happens if I don't have any no payload variable, payload is overridden, then you could see what message, what payload, whatever you have said, the same thing will be displayed here. Here I have overridden, that is the reason it is displaying, means over updated information. Now let's talk about that. When do we do not have access to the child flow? So that is a different case. What is that case? Now let's have a new flow. Okay, let's create a new listener. Okay, this we call it as a name as a child flow. Okay, this is a new child flow, means it is completely a new main flow for me, right? I will rename this as HTTP. Okay, let's stop the server as making. Okay, HTTP. Okay, why I'm going to rename HTTP, right? We will use this different HTTP listeners, same listener, but different path. Means assume this is a different API. Okay, you are calling from one API to another API. That's the reason I just created this one. Here also, we will use the same thing. Like 1 second, how we do? Okay, let's go with the variable only or payload, just same variable. Here I set some variable here, so this variable is different. Now say child variable. Okay, HTTP child flow variable. Now what we do, just we put some logger to see whether it is coming here or not, and also we said one more variable, right, after logger. Call it as, just see where, and give a message as after logger. Okay, now you see this using flow reference. Using flow reference, you cannot call this another HTTP flows. So what is the another option? This time you have to toggle this, means comment this, means you don't have to delete that, you just toggle, right click, toggle comment, means it will comment it. Now we have to have a request component which consumes a HTTP service. Okay, drag it here. From here you are trying to call this flow. So what is the syntax? You just click here, it is already coming with that, and it is expecting some configurations like HTTP listener we are configuring, right? The same way we have to configure it here. Go here, click, and you see this, what is that host is local host only, and port is, you know, the port is 8888, right? Now your connection is ready. You have to save, and path is the what path. You could see this HTTP local host, it did look like that, but what path is this slash child flow? Means just child flow syntax, it looks like this. So you are calling this one from here, so where the child flow exists with this path, it will go and call this one. This is the one which have holding that path. You see this is HTTP listener and say child flow, so this guy will call here. When you try to access this parent, right, you see this parent, and right here it will not come. How you do that? You just see here in the transform message, you try to bring that guy variables, right? For example, now here where's you have a where's dot, what you see this one, p where. Okay, you try to access this thing here, you cannot see this one. Okay, parent where's. Okay, okay, you see this where's dot. See, this is a child where, see where. What is this? Child where and see where. You are not able to see these things right here. And the same way here, if you go back here, right, say where's dot, what you could see where's, right? Here you cannot see other than this parent, right? What variables here you can see only this one. This also gone because see, this is, we are not referring this flow. Where's that? So whatever the variable here, p where, you just, you can see that one, right? Now that also not possible. Why? The reason here, right? This payload will be accessible here, and the variables will be lost, and variables will be within that scope only, which means, right, now if we have a variables declared in the parent flow, that will be within that scope. Then once it call another service using HTTP request, this variable scope will die here, means it will stop here, it will not proceed, means it will not forward to the next flow, then you cannot access anything here. So which means that this is a different API, right? So this variables, what variables you have declared it here, you can access here only. This updated payload also, you see you have a payload here, right? Now try to set a payload. Now try to override payload, like earlier previously we have updated the payload. Now here we update that. Okay, update payload. Now this updated payload, you cannot see it back to the parent flow, but sorry, this updated payload, right, you can see it back because we are sending back this message to the parent flow. But variables, what it will be within the scope, these variables you cannot access in the main flow. Similarly, main flow variables you cannot access in the child flow. So but you can ask a question, but how you can access that? Now I want the variable that is set in the parent and I want to access in the child flow. Can we have a solution for that? Yes, we have a solution, but it is not that direct way. We need to have a query params, header params, so on that way you can utilize or you can access your child flow, sorry, parent flow variables in the child flow. How you do that? Wherever, whichever the component you are using, right? Here you just click that. You could say this, you have to see first, see that one, whether you are getting or posting the data. You say, if you say get, then you cannot get that. Say you are trying to post it, right? To get that variables in the parent, sorry, in the child flow, you have to post it, right? Post in the sense it will post that message to you. That and payload, what payload you are, say if this payload you want to send this payload, right, you can send this payload. Now I'm sending the payload and the variables. So how we can access it here, right? Using query param, you can access, as we already seen this syntax query param, how it looks. Just add a new param, right? This should be in this double quotes saying here param value. So what is this param value name? It is a where's dot. What is this name is p where. Okay, this should not be in the double quotes. This should be where's dot p where, which means then whatever the data is there in this variable, right, you are sending it where's that p where, which is holding the param value. Then how you can access this value in that my child flow is, then you have to go to the child flow here, right? HTTP, it is not a child flow, it is another flow. We cannot call it as a child flow. This is differently another API. But how you do that one? Then you see this one, query param. We are getting this value from the query param. How you do that? All the things are storing in the attributes dot see query params dot. You could see this one. What is that param value? Param value. So this query param is holding that data. Now you can display that here, right? What is that? Query param, sorry, where's dot, you could see query param is holding. Then you can see this data here, right, in this variable. But this you can access here only, but this you cannot display this here, right? This payload right here updating, right? Updated payload. Right, this now what we can display at the end of this, go back to here and try to display this parent variables is what the parent variables is pvar, right? That's all. Now you could see what payload will be displayed here. Okay, that's all. Now we'll see this simple output. So the difference, you see this one, right? If we have a flows, then using flow reference you can have access to parent payload variables in the child variables payloads in the parent. But if it is used another, if you call another flow using http request to consume the another API, consume another service, then this payload you can send directly as a part of body. You can see every request when you are consuming, right? You must have a body that is provided here, right? To call another service, minimum these things definitely will be there. Body, you can send a body, headers, query params, URI params, right? So you can send as a part of these attributes, HTTP attributes called as a body, headers, query params, and right, you cannot directly send these variables to another API. So whatever payload, whatever variables, right? Payload you can just send that payload as is, but variables you have to set it through HTTP attributes of query params or URI params or body params, no matter. That way you can use this in the another flow. Let's see what it has come up. Okay, it is deployed. Let's see what is expected here. See, now this is the parent variable, updated payload. I told you, right? See, when you have posted this message here, and then that is the reason you are able to get the payload here, and the set payload which you are sending and set, right? That is sending back. Why it is sending back here? This guy uses the default get post method, means it is allowing all get post method. Then it is getting that data. Even it this flow get the data and send back to this one. That is why you could see updated payload. You don't see this parent payload, right? So this is how it behaves with, right, HTTP request and subflows. Then in the next session we'll see exception handling between these flows. Okay, we'll stop up to here now. So that's